conversation. Our topic today is, why is the church so boring? And I think it's interesting that we Indians are generally quite a religious culture, religious people. So why is it that the youth today find church so boring? So Father, what was your experience like when you were growing up in church, when you were, when you were youth?
Yeah, I liked your observation, Rishika, that generally we Indians are very religious, but present day young people are also exposed to much more than their traditional faiths. I think for many young people their religion is Netflix
Right.
or Facebook or Instagram. They're really in touch with what's happening on those fronts, but they may not know what's happening in their temple or in their mosque or in their church. And I might be speaking in generalities, but maybe this is a trend that we observe, that although we Indians argue a lot about religion in our politics, but when we go to the grassroots, when we ask the ordinary young people on the streets, they are not so concerned about those matters, and their values are not really taken either from the Bible or from the Quran or from the Bhagavad Gita, but they are rather taken from the secular media. Where do young people get their values? Where do they get their orientation in life? Where do they learn what's right and what's wrong, or what's good and what's bad? It's mainly from the mainstream media. And so keeping this in mind, many young people may be feeling that church is boring. And I can relate to that, because growing up as a young person myself, I also had this experience of course, I was brought up in a very strongly Catholic family, and I remember having family prayer and attending prayer meetings and Sunday Mass, which was a regular part of our life. And because our parents did it, we did it, as kids. But there comes a time when you're a teen, a young person, when you begin to question things, you begin to measure up what you've learned as a kid with what you're being taught by the mainstream media, what you're learning in school and college. And maybe sometimes you're finding there's a conflict between what you're learning newly outside of the family and outside of the church, and what you've already had up to now as a kid. So like when I was 9 or 10 years old, I was so excited because I was going to receive 2 sacraments for one. Because in those days they used to give the kids both First Holy Communion and Confirmation whenever the bishop was visiting the parish.
Right, I was wondering, right.
So all that the catechism teachers wanted to know is whether the kids knew their prayers right?
Right.
And so if I knew my prayers and the teacher was convinced that I knew my prayers, hooray, I've got 2 sacraments for the price of one, And I remember feeling like a very special boy for receiving that, But the outcome of having just that basic minimum of formation is that I really didn't understand the great gift that I received in confirmation, And maybe that's the experience of many young people growing up here in India. I could be wrong, but I think that is, the experience of many young people, that up to confirmation, maybe you do understand a little bit about your faith, but then post that, you really don't understand what's happening. And I think that is at the crux of why many experience that church is boring.
Right.
I connect it a lot to my own experience of learning, first of all, to, just something to share with you is that I never had an interest in sports growing up as a young lad, and but I was all into video games.
Oh, that's I think that's going to be very relatable.
Yeah, so I used to like games like Need for Speed, Age of Empires, Tomb Raider.
Oh, nice.
And that was my life for a significant point of my life as a teenager. But one of the games that I was introduced to was FIFA, which was a video game about football. And I got so involved in it. I used to have competitions with my brother about who can defeat the other. And From the video game, I moved on to watching the real football games on TV in the English Premier League, in the Italian League, and all those things. And when I got to understand the rules of the game, I understood the exhilaration that fills the heart when you score a goal, you know, even if it's in the virtual world. Then I realized I'm missing out on something if I'm not really playing on the field. And that's how I began to connect with the actual experience of kicking a ball, dribbling it, tackling others. So one of the reasons why many young people may feel the church is boring is because they've not understood what it's all about.
Right.
Yeah, and if there's only something that they find is meaningful for their life, something that touches them, an experience, a connection with a person who represents the church,
Right.
it is that begins the journey of finding the real meaning of church.